white, bright, blessed days, dark, sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, also in the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, say, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll not much more. I'll never know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful
Where's everybody today? We're missing like 10 people. There's 11 here. There's like 23 in the class. Where is everybody? Is there some event going on today I don't know about? I'm asking. I'm not trying to be. So like a. Okay. There's no testing today, right?
There's some.
Right. There might be some makeups, but there's no like. They didn't give out passes at homeroom. They gave out these COVID tests, right? Okay. Am I missing something?
No.
Is everybody sick? Is there some big thing with flu going around I don't know about? There we go, 12 and 13. Okay. Thank you. Who has, anybody have permission slips? Permission slips? Permission slips? I start making phone calls this afternoon. Permission slips? Okay. Who needs one? Yo. Yo. Need one, need one. Who else needs one? Okay. Okay. Go. Hello. Do you have a permission slip or did you already have one in? Okay. You guys have one or need one? It's gotta be signed by a parent. Because we're recording you. Look at you, bonus points. Is it signed? A parent? Okay. That's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you for that. Whew. We're still missing, like, I feel like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, well. Hello, good morning. How's everybody today? How many of you thought, I'm just curious, when they passed out the COVID test this morning, how many of you thought that they wanted you to take the COVID test right then and there? That's what you, and how many of you thought, oh, I gotta go put this in my locker and take it home? Okay. So I had a couple of kids in my home who were like, am I supposed to do this now? And I said, oh, I didn't even think about that, but no. You take them home. Okay, you thank Larry Hogan. Who's Larry Hogan? Yeah, okay. Who's this lady? Bill? You are correct. Who is she? An environmentalist? You know from where? Hello? Ireland? You think Ireland? You're close. Thank you. You know who this is? No clue. Okay. Anybody else? So the name was right. Greta what? Thunberg? Thunberg. Is she in your reading? She is. Her name's in there. She's a child. She was. She's probably in her early 20s now. But at the time she came to popularity, she was like, I want to say 14 or 15, and she's from Europe. I want to say the Netherlands. I'm not sure that's correct. Swedish. Sweden. All right. I'll believe you. That sounds good. And she's become kind of this international symbol of the environment and taking care of the environment in the future. And so she's mentioned in the book, and I thought I'd put her picture up there. Yay. Okay. So let's jump right in. I'll tell you, I've been having some technical issues here. We're going to do our best to see if I can get this to work. Okay, here we go. All right, so big announcement, study calendar. We're going to look at that in just a minute. Let's see here. This is our breakdown of the calendar for the rest of the year. And so we're right here on 9.3 and 9.4. And then I have you guys again on Friday, right? I have you guys again on Friday, right?
Yeah.
You guys are all super excited, I can tell. Okay. Does anybody have their submission for the question bag? Admittedly, not the most. If you listen to the morning announcements yesterday, we posed a question for AP History students. It said write down the answer on a piece of paper, stick it in the bag. We'll pick out a name for a prize later in the week. It was on the announcements. I've got a couple of them in here. Anybody have one of this class to put in? On the morning announcements yesterday, I made an announcement about the AP exam, and I asked the question. And I said, if you listen to the question, you write your name, write the answer on a piece of paper with your name, stick it in my question bag. The only bag I have, I'll get a nicer one. And I'll give out a prize. I had a couple people put some stuff in yesterday. Anybody have one they're going to do today? No, you had to listen to the announcements. Okay, so I would say keep an ear on the announcements. What's today? Today is Wednesday. I might try and get one on again tomorrow, so for Friday. So keep an ear out, see what you hear, put your name in. This week's prize had a candy bar. If anybody had the right answer in the class, I had a candy bar, but nobody put their name in, so we'll have to wait till later in the week, right? Okay. Exam preparation. All right. So this is a big deal. I think I sent an email out last night.
Yep.
And I linked this document. And I posted it to the announcement section of It's Learned. So I wanted to explain to you what this was. One of the questions that comes up quite a bit is, how do I break this huge amount of material down into a manageable chunk so that as I study each night, I'm being productive? And so this calendar, which started yesterday, it came out yesterday, so I didn't get it till yesterday. That's why I posted it yesterday. It breaks down the entire course into some reasonable sections to review each day between now and May the 12th. So if you're sitting down for your hour in the evening to say, all right, what do I need to study for my world history AP exam, there's a list for each day of things that you can study. Now, it's not just a list. If you look at the, here we go. So I think I sent it to you as a PDF. If you look at the PDF, let's make this a little bigger so we can all see it. So it's color coded and it's got some different information on it. If you hover over each of these, it should be a link, and it will take you, if you click on it, you might have to hit Control and click on it. There we go.
If your teacher was like me, we were coming in hot at the beginning of the course and spending way too much time on these.
All right, so this is Mr. Friedman. He's a competitor of Highmark.
You know on test day how you turn on?
He's a competitor of Highmark, but he does the same thing. So you've already seen the Highmark's history stuff. So to make it, mix it up a little bit, this is a different person who does the same thing. And so if you click on that link, and there's a link for each one, it'll take you there. The same is true for the blue item. If you click on the blue item, it'll take you to a YouTube video. And then it lists the AMSCO chapters to review. So if you look here, it kind of breaks it down, the whole thing between now and May the 12th. So I wanted to just encourage you to, if you were looking for a way to kind of organize all of this, keep it straight in your head, here's a good way to do that. And so there you go. Any questions? Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Or is that a complete waste of time? Helpful? Raise your hand. Waste of time? It's too early in the morning. Quit bothering me with these ridiculous calendar questions. It is 9:30. If you were in the Army, you'd have been up for 6 hours by now. Your day be winding down.
Are we in the Army?
No, you're not. You're in the Social Studies Army, right? The World History Army. What's the old Army adage? We do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day? Right? Okay. All right, so AP exam prep, that's your suggestion for today. And we'll have continue to have some more AP exam preps as we go through. This is just a summary. May 12th, we know about this. Just to remember, the LEQ, which is what we're working on, is the last section of the test. You have 40 minutes to write that essay, and it's worth a total of 6 points in the formula for your AP exam score. So, jumping in today, a lot of interesting topics in this particular unit. We're not gonna go through this with a whole lot of great depth in any particular topic, but I did want to kind of break some things down for you. Causes and effects of environmental changes from 1900 to the present, and how does the global economy change and remain the same from 1900 to the present? Okay? So a couple of key concepts. Causes of environmental changes, effects of environmental changes, debates about global warming, and then we have economic issues, acceleration of free market economies, economic change, economic continuities, transnational free trade organizations, than multinational corporations? Who's excited about the development of multinational corporations? Who can give me an example of a multinational corporation? Amazon, Apple, Samsung, what? McDonald's. You're laughing. I thought you said something. Yeah, absolutely. It's a multi-billion-dollar multinational organization. Absolutely. Anybody else? I'm sorry? Chick-fil-A? Chick-fil-A is certainly a national organization. Do Chick-fil-A's overseas? If I go to China, am I going to find a Chick-fil-A? I don't know. I'm asking. If I go to China, would I find a KFC? Yes. KFC, I remember vaguely recall reading somewhere, like KFC was more popular in China than it was in the United States. Is that true? That could be true. How about General Electric? How about Nestle? How about the Edgewood Creamery? Why? It's delicious, don't get me wrong. I love a scoop of ice cream from the Edgewood Creamery, but it's not a multinational corporation. Does that make sense? How about Breyer's ice cream? Possibly. I don't know. Sell Breyer's overseas. I would think so. But I don't know. How about Ben and Jerry's? Is some Ben and Jerry's in Canada? Probably. Where's Ben and Jerry's made? Say again? Oh, I thought you said the answer. Anybody know? It's Vermont, isn't it? Ben and Jerry's is made in Vermont? I think so. Okay. So all good examples. Can anybody tell me if something they've seen on the news lately about multinational corporations in Russia? Say again? McDonald's shut down. Who else? Did Starbucks pull out of Russia, I thought. Yeah. So a lot of companies that do business in Russia are no longer allowed to do business in Russia, both for ethical reasons, but also because of the sanctions that have been put in place in order to try and curtail Russia during the war. So, interesting stuff. But it all goes back to, all of those topics go to, how does the global economy change and remain the same over time. So those are good connections to make. All right, let's see here. So what I'd like you to do, we're going to get started with a little short answer question warm-up. I emailed to you about 5 minutes ago, all right, about 20 minutes ago at this point, a link for a Padlet. So I'd like you to take a look at the short answer question from page 647. I'd like you to respond to one of these and put your answer in the Padlet I linked. Let's see here. I have several of them around. I've got an extra charger over here. That extra charger over there. There's one right there. There's an extension cord behind you. See him? Oh, okay. So what do you need? Yeah. You need a piece of paper? Okay. All right, we're coming on 2 minutes left. 2 minutes to finish, please. That's the link. Like, I don't have another way to send it. But it's really come in at 9, right at 9 o'clock today. It would be unusual that you wouldn't get it. Go to the search bar. Type in my name, Albert, H-U-M-B-E-R-T. I don't have an answer for you right now, but that's an issue. All right, so that's about 5 minutes. So let's see what we got. All righty, look at here. This is very exciting. Let's see what we got here. If you've got them, go ahead and post them. We only have 2 people. Is the Wi-Fi not working now?
It's still not working online. I don't know about anyone else who's online.
Okay. You can try and get in manual. You know how to get in manually into the Wi-Fi? You know how to do that?
I disconnected on my end. It comes back for
My best suggestion for you then is to restart. That still doesn't work. You have to talk to Miss. That's yours? Is that the answer to your issue? Does your Wi-Fi connected? Okay. All right, well, let's take a look here. So we got a couple options. 1A, let's see here. $647. Explain one action governments take in Stephen's view to keep people in need from accessing medications. And this person wrote one action the governments take in Stephen's view that keeps people in need from accessing medications is taxes. He states that taxes make it hard for people who really need the medicine from accessing it. How so? Does he talk about taxes or does he talk about tariffs? What's the difference between a tax and a tariff? Does that make sense? You know there's a difference between a tax and a tariff. Any takers? It's an excellent question. You know?
Tariffs are wrong for transferring like goods from one country to another.
Yes. Tariffs relate to international trade. And a tax is what? Say again, what's a tax? I can't hear you. It's issued, but it's a fee, it's a government fee, right? So all tariffs are kind of tax, but not all taxes are tariffs. Does that make sense? If I make widgets and I put them in my store, and you come to my store and buy those widgets, you have to pay a sales tax. That's a fee from the government. But you don't have to pay a tariff because I didn't import it from some other place. If I paid somebody in China to make my widgets and had China ship the widget to me, and then I sold them in my store, I could have to pay an additional tax called a tariff because I've imported that from another country. Does that make sense? So in this question, this is correct. The invention of vaccines improved the health of the population. That's not the one that we just read. Where's the one we just read? He states taxes make it hard for people who really need the medicine from accessing. This is correct. I think I might replace the word taxes with tariffs, just for clarity. And I might say something like, it's the increased price that makes the cost prohibitive. So when you put a big tariff on something, you may make it too costly. And medicines are a real easy thing to tax because what happens if you don't get the medication? You die. So people are going to pay a lot of money for medication to keep them alive. That's why sometimes people tax those, unfortunately. People are going to absolutely pay that money, right? All right. Good start. That's a good start for us. Let's see here. 1A, let's do this one, 2B. Anybody want to read this one and tell us what they think? Don't everybody volunteer at once. Go ahead.
Pneumonia was a big sickness found naturally in people because the widespread overuse of antibiotics since the creation of penicillin-resistant strains of streptococcus pneumonia, which was of great concern to the medical community. Over 2 million people have passed away due to the spreads. I think it answers the question.
What's the question? Explain one historical example that supports Stephen's argument. Pneumonia was a big thing to the president, the wide overuse. All right. You think that gets the point? Yeah, I think it does. All right, call somebody to the next one. They can't call on me. Although I appreciate the effort. Just point and say you. You pointing at Miss Day? Okay. You tell me when to stop. Which one do you want to do? Okay.
Medical development that had built the population around the world was antiviral drugs. This was created in order to prevent HIV from weakening the immune system. This development allowed the patient to live for many years, resulting in a higher population. Yes, it is the question.
Okay. You think that gets the point?
They didn't put the thing they were supposed to put, like, aren't you supposed to put the question part?
You can, but does this answer the question? Yeah, I'd say that probably gets the point. I would agree. Just a quick note. This person wrote antiretroviral drugs. What's the difference between a viral drug and a retroviral drug? I don't know either. There is actually a difference between a virus and a retrovirus. I'm not a biologist, well, I know a little bit about biology, but just make note, if you see retrovirus, that it's that's something very specific as opposed to just a viral drug, so just make a mental note of that. If you see retrovirus, you should write retrovirus. Yep.
Retroviruses are like viruses that insert a copy of its RNA genome into the DNA of a host cell that it invades and change the genome of the host cell.
Right.
And then a virus is just agent that replicates only inside the living cells of an organism.
So you're saying a virus is a DNA process and a retrovirus is an RNA process? Does that make sense? You guys all did 9th grade biology, right? You know the difference between DNA and RNA? DNA stands for DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. The difference is an oxygen molecule. Deoxy versus, right? Some of you are looking at me like I got 4 heads. Like, you should know, this is all like 7th grade biology, 9th grade biology. You guys should know this, right? Don't look. You guys did the Punnett squares in 7th grade. You did the little thing with the peas where you had to find the DNA and look at it under the microscope.
Yep.
Right?
No. We were virtual.
You were virtual the last 10 weeks. You guys did Punnett Squares
Yeah.
in 7th grade? That's a Punnett Square,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the square.
right? When you
It's
look at characteristics, genetics, you talked about DNA
The
versus
types
RNA.
of your parents, like why you get.
Like why some people have,
The possibility of you having brown eyes.
Yes. blue eyes, brown eyes, red hair, blonde hair, dark hair. Genetically modified wheat, non-genetically modified wheat. What do you modify? The DNA, right?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Yes, you modify the DNA. That's how it works. You pick. Okay. We're just gonna let that go for right now. We may come back to it. All right, Miss Day, pick somebody for the next one.
Me?
Yeah. Who you picking on? Who you calling on?
I'll do that a random person.
Me?
Yep.
Okay, you tell me when to stop. Stop. Which one are you doing? This one? Let me. Let's see if I can get that a little bit more centered. There we go. Read it out loud for us.
In Stevens' point of view, one action that government takes that keeps people from accessing medicine is restricting trade through
Extortionate.
tariffs, and imposing these trade restrictions making access to medicine extremely difficult. All it needs to know is to get. What's the question?
Explain one action governments take, in Stephen's view, to keep people in need from accessing medications.
Yeah, it answers the question.
It does, I agree. And I had to read the extortionate. I had to read that like twice too. That's not a very common word, is it? So, does that answer the question? Cite evidence, explain the answer? Yes. In fact, looking at these are great. I'm very pleased because if I went back in the list of Padlets that I have to the beginning of the year and looked at the short answer questions that the class wrote, most of them would get no credit, right? But if I look at these, now here we are at the end of the class, a few weeks from the exam. Look at these, man. Look at these. These are great. I think now I haven't read all of these. We don't have time to go through all of these, but I will look at these later. But I just based on the length alone, I think most of these will get the point, right? You guys should be very pleased with yourselves. It shows how much you've grown over the course. Yay? Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So quickly, that was not our so quick warm up, but it was a good practice for us. So I want to get into the lesson a little bit. 6.3 and 6.4. 6.3 talks about environmental issues. 6.4 talks largely about economic issues. The information that's in there is pretty self-explanatory. There's a lot of really neat topics here. And short of going through the websites for each one of these, there's a lot of different organizations that are mentioned. Most of which are things that you should, generally speaking, already be familiar with. So the concept of global warming is something that's a big issue in lots of other classes. We're not going to go through that a whole lot today. For economics, the big issue here is the continued development of what are the two major economic systems we see in the 20th century? Louder? Capitalism and communism. And we continue to see this struggle back and forth. One of the things that the book talks about is the expansion of capitalism into other markets. So it talks about multinational organizations, it talks about free trade movements, it talks about of the difference between production and knowledge economies. Name a country that is a production economy. China. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said India.
India is too, to some extent. India is very much a growing marketplace. So the United States doesn't do a huge business with India the way we do with China. But look at our map. Look where India is on the map. You can't get any further away from the United States than India, right? I mean, it's literally on the other side of the globe. Whereas China is just a quick boat ride away. Does that make sense? But what big company, multinational company, can you think of in India that produces massive amounts of material for businesses all over the world? Starts with the letter A? Nope. It's almost as big.
Wait.
Anybody heard of that? Really? That surprises me. Okay. Let me. I'm gonna look at it here, just to make sure there's nothing hinky with the website. Alibaba.com. If you is a multi hundreds of billions times over company that rivals Amazon. It's just a massive company. It's based out of India, and if you are buying goods that you want to sell in a store, and there's everything in here from underwear to lipstick to hair combs to tennis shoes. All manner of different electronics, all manner of different products. You buy them here wholesale. You don't buy them from this site one at a time like you do Amazon. You buy them from this site 100 at a time, 1,000 at a time, 100,000 at a time. And then they ship that to your store, to your warehouse, to your home, and then you resell those items at a higher price than you paid for them. That's how you make money. Does that make sense? So India does have a huge production economy. Alibaba is a good example. What country does India share a northern border with? You can go look at the map if you want to go look at the map. Or you can call on a friend to get some other hands around you. What country does India share its northern border with? Sorry? That's one. What else? That's one. Who else? China. Think there's some trading back and forth? Probably so. Although that particular area is on the western side of the Gobi Desert, so I don't know that it's a whole lot of trading back and forth. It's not like Canada and the United States. It's in the middle of the desert. But the whole point here is that economic systems are growing and evolving in the late 1900s, early 2000s, and democratic forces versus communist forces continues to be a political issue. The book makes note of an incident in 1989 in China. Starts with the letter T. Did anybody read about that? Tiananmen Square. Tell me what happened at Tiananmen Square.
Like, a bunch of college students, went to the square and just got massacred by the Chinese army.
Why?
They were protesting.
Where is Tiananmen Square? What is Tiananmen? Separate from the issue, the incident, what is Tiananmen Square? Don't leave, I have something for you from homeroom, so make sure you see me after class. Alright, so the capital, it is in Beijing. Beijing is the what of China? It's the capital of China. And like many capitals around the world, there is a large, open, public space in the heart of the capital. If you were in the United States, we have the Mall. If you were in London, it would be Trafalgar Square. If you were in Moscow, it would be Red Square. If you were in Beijing, the large, open, public space is called Tiananmen Square. So we know from our Chinese history, we had the Communist Revolution in 1911, 1912, right? And the Democratic Republic of China is fighting with the communists under Mao Zedong, and they go back and forth. They take a break for World War II, and after World War II, the Civil War starts up again. The communists win. Mao Zedong comes to power, right? You remember that? Mao Zedong, not a real nice guy. He starts with his movement to industrialize China. And what's that called? Yes?
I don't know. I was gonna ask him, didn't he carry the red book or something?
Yep, he makes him carry kind of his book of thought. It's called the Red Book. And he lives until the 1970s, and then he dies. Because he's an old man at that point. When he dies, China starts to open up to capitalism. They allow a little more private ownership. Private businesses are coming in, and it's a good thing. And the students, the young people in China, really like that idea. And so they start to protest against some of the old communist ideas. And so in 1989, this all kind of comes to a head. There are protests all over China, the largest of which is in the capital city of Beijing in Tiananmen Square. These college students, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, not much older than you are, camp out in Tiananmen Square for weeks. So it's not like one random Tuesday afternoon this all happened. It had been growing for some time. They're camping out in this square for weeks trying to get pro-capitalist, pro-democratic reforms in communist China, right? Big meeting of the ideas. So there's a very famous scene. I'm going to show you. So, if I can get the thing. So, the whole thing is, or one of the big things is, this is all being covered on television, right? Because it's a major international news story. There's news crews all over the place. And so, because there's news crews all over the place, when the Chinese government eventually decides enough is enough, we're going to take care of this, they start rolling tanks down the street heading towards Tiananmen Square. And so there's this very famous scene. And understand, this is a column of tanks. It's 50 tanks long. Now, and it's headed towards Tiananmen Square. And you can see there's dozens of these tanks. It goes on forever. And watch what happens. It's one guy. One guy who stands out in the middle of the street and it's just an average guy. You can see he's a white shirt, black pants. He's carrying groceries. And he says no to the Chinese government. You are not going to roll this column of tanks into the square and hurt all these people. And he says, you may run me over, but I will physically stand in the way of the tank. What do you think's going to happen? Are they going to mow him over, or is the tank's going to stop? How many of you say they roll right over him?
I don't think he would show some video of someone getting ran over.
How many of you say the column stops? The column's going to machine gun 10,000 at least college students. You really think they care about some random guy in the street? Let's see what happens. This was covered live at the time on the news. The tank stops. And he just, the guy's sort of like, oh, I didn't really think you're going to stop. So he just stands there. The tank tries to go around. He says no. He starts waving his groceries at him. Get out the way. People clapping for him. But that's not enough. Now he gets kind of brazen now. He gets up, he starts yelling at him. Go home. Now, if you're the tank commander, what are you going to do at this point? You're going to pop out with your sidearm and shoot him? You can hear gunshots in the background in Tiananmen Square, a couple points in this. Who wants to predict? Is this guy going to live or die? Y'all some real negative Nellies in here. Holy cow. All right, let's see what happens. He's just kind of stunned by the whole thing. Like, he really didn't think they would stop. Go home, he says. Go home. You can hear the gunshots in the background at Tiananmen Square where they're shooting kids. So eventually, oh, here comes the commander up out of the tank.
Get VIP access to hundreds of new Hondas, and you'll never pay over MSRP.
And there's a Honda commercial.
Find the Honda that you've been shopping for with exclusive access to our huge allocation, like Honda Pilot, CR-Vs, with a new
I don't want to see your stupid Honda commercial. All right. Well, eventually what happens is
Tiananmen Square massacre.
Eventually what happens is that some other passers-by come out in front of the tank too and pick the guy up and carry him off to the sidewalk so he doesn't get run over by the tanks. The tank column then proceeds into Tiananmen Square, where it's part of what they call the Tiananmen Massacre. The tanks, a big heavy tank like that, at several places on the tank. There's one at the top, there's one at the front, has a machine gun. And what they believe happened is the tanks rolled up into the square and just opened fire into the crowd. and killed several thousand, they estimate up to 10,000 students. But what they did was the Chinese government burned the bodies, so there was no evidence of how many people they killed. Yeah?
Did the guy get like arrested?
No, because they didn't know who he was. It took them a while. The reporters did eventually track down who the guy was. But that picture of the lone person in front of the column of tanks really became a symbol for resistance, for nonviolent resistance, for civil protest, for pro-democracy kinds of things. And you have to imagine that guy in a moment put his life on the line. They could have very easily just rolled right over the guy. But he put his life on the line to protest an oppressive government. Does that make sense? So that's an interesting story. And that's something that you probably need to know about just being a young person. So when you see these stories on the news about Russians in Ukraine, or the Chinese invasion of other neighbors, or you hear about the pro-democracy forces in Korea or in the Cold War, just understand how deeply personal that is to so many people who are willing to stand up for, literally in this case, stand up for a democratic form of government that we've enjoyed in this country for 250 years. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Hello? You with me? Okay. So, we're looking at the clock. It's 10:15. What I would like to do, we've got about 20 minutes left. I've got a little video here from Heimler on the LEQ. Now, he uses an AP US history example, so I might skip over some of the example parts, but I do want you to hear kind of his introduction to the LEQ, and then I'll give you some time to finish up the LEQ organizer that I gave out on Monday, so that when you come to class on Friday, you'll have an opportunity to write out the full LEQ. Does that make sense? All right, look at the enthusiasm. All right, here's our friend, Mr. Heimler.
Well, hey there, welcome back to Heimler's History. Now in this video, I'm going to teach you how to write the long essay question on the LEQ for AP World History, AP US History, and AP European History. Those courses are all graded on the same rubric, so everything I'm about to tell you applies to all of them. So if you're ready to get them brain cow's milk, and I can think of no better person to milk them than me, let's get to it. Let me just quickly mention that this video is just one part of my AP Essay Cram course, which actually goes into much greater depth in how to write PBQs, LEQs, and SEQs for AP World, AP US, and AP European History. It's got examples for every point on the rubrics that will show you what earns the point and what doesn't. Plus, there's videos from this guy that you won't be able to find here on YouTube, so if you're struggling with these essays, then this might be the thing to help you. Link in the description below. So the LEQ is the last thing you're going to have to do on your exam. You will have already passed through the multiple choice and the short answer questions and the DBQ, and if at that point you have any shred of a life and human dignity remaining in your soul, that you have what it takes to earn a perfect score on that essay, which should be a 6. Now you're going to have 40 minutes to write this essay, which is plenty if you know what you're doing. Additionally, they're going to give you a choice between 3 prompts on which to write. So obviously you should choose the one that you know the most about, and you can know before you get there what time periods they're going to be pulling their prompts from, because they've told us ahead of time. Just in case you like a tasty chart laying it all out for you, here it is for your immense satisfaction. Okay, so I hope that helps you prepare. Now, if you know you're strong in one of those periods, then that's good, because you'll know that you'll have at least one question coming from that period. Now, step 1 of earning a perfect score is this: read the prompt. When I say read the prompt, I mean read the prompt carefully. Don't just read by it once and assume that you have. As someone who has scored these essays at the national reading, I know that so many students make mistakes that cost them points simply because it's clear that they did not read the prompt closely enough. Just remember, and I never tire of reminding you of this, when you are under pressure, you are dumber than you think. When the clock starts ticking and your grades are on the line or your college acceptance is on the line, that pressure will knock your IQ down precipitously. So in order to combat that, read the prompt carefully. Mark it up. What historical thinking skill is in this thing? Am I going to compare things? Am I going to talk about change, etc., etc.? When you figure that out, write it down. Also, what's the time period they're giving you? Circle it. Your essay needs to deal with that time period and not some other time period. Now, one common casualty of the I'm dumber than I think phenomenon comes to the time period. If the prompt asks you to write about events in the 20th century, your pressure-cooked brain is going to want to write an essay about events in the 2000s. And hey, I know that right now you know that the 20th century means the 1900s, but at the end of your whole exam, your brain is going to be sloshing around in your head like some roadside porridge in medieval France. Trust me on this. Write out the dates if they give it to you in centuries. Okay, now that you understand the prompt, let's move on to step 2 and get that decision. In order to do that, we need to cozy up to the rubric and know exactly what they're asking of you. So the first section of the rubric is the thesis, and you can earn 1 point for this. And in order to earn this point, your thesis needs to be argumentative. Someone should be able to disagree with it or agree with it, and don't just restate the prompt here. If you do, no point for you. So just like in the DBQ, here's how I would suggest that you set up your thesis. Despite counter-argument, because evidence 1 and evidence 2 might argue. Now, this isn't the only way to do it, and it's actually more complex than you need to earn the point here. But I teach it this way because when you include a counter-argument here in your thesis, you are setting yourself up for complexity later. Let me be clear. In your thesis, you need to be specific. When I say evidence 1 and evidence 2, and there could be 3 if you're feeling especially saucy, you actually need to name that evidence. And let me give you an example. Despite the argument that the raising of taxes after the French and Indian War was the main cause of the American Revolution, there's my counter-argument, it was the denial of basic political rights, that's my first piece of evidence, and the growing frustration over the end of salutary neglect, that's my second piece of evidence, that provided a more significant cause for the American Revolution, and that's my argument. That is a beautiful thesis. If you do something like that, you will earn a point. Now, the second point on the rubric is for contextualization. And for this, you can earn 1 point. Essentially, what they're asking you to do here is to put the argument of your thesis in this larger historical context. And the rubric says you can do this before, during, or after the prompt. And you do what you do, but I have never seen anyone successfully contextualize during or after the period. So my advice is contextualize before the period that you're writing about. I think that makes more natural sense. So what you're going to want to do here is to write 1 paragraph, probably 3 to 4 sentences that sets the stage for your argument. Don't go back too far in time, only something like 50 to 100 years. There are no hard, fast rules on this, but in general, the closer you are to the time period you're writing about, the better. There are 2 things to mention here that will be the difference between a point and no point. Number 1, make sure you use specific historical evidence in your contextualization. And number 2, make sure you demonstrate how it is relevant to your argument. So be specific. Use vocabulary words here. Don't just talk in generalities. But then go 1 step further and then demonstrate how those events set the stage and are related to your argument. Okay, now the next part of the rubric is the evidence section, and here you can earn up to 2 points. You can get 1 point for describing evidence related to the prompt, and you can get 2 points for arguing with evidence in relation to the prompt. Now, before I tell you the difference between describing and arguing with evidence, let me answer a potential question. How many pieces of evidence do I need to use in this essay? And that is a great question. The rubric doesn't give you an upper limit, but it does give you a lower limit. The rubric specifically says pieces of evidence, plural. So the bare minimum you have to use either in describing or arguing is 2. Now, let me show you the difference between describing and arguing with evidence. To describe evidence that's relevant to the prompt, you just need to name it and define it. So if one of my pieces of evidence is imperialism, okay, so I just named it. Now I go on to say, which is when one nation extends political control over another nation. Okay, so I just described that evidence. I named it and I explained, but hey, you're not just here to describe evidence, baby. You're here to get a 6. So let me show you how to argue with that evidence. And to set you up for this, let me suggest a paragraph structure that will form an argument. First, write a topic sentence, and this will be one of your sub-arguments. So in that thesis that I showed you before about the American Revolution, my first topic sentence would be based on my first piece of evidence, and it might go like this. The first cause of the American Revolution was the denial of basic political rights. Now the next thing I need to do is to name and describe my evidence, and in this case I'll use taxation without representation. So maybe I'd say something like this. The colonists complained loudly that the new taxes imposed upon them were done so without their consent, which they summarized into the rallying cry, no taxation without representation. Okay, I just named and described my evidence. Now I need to argue with it. However, it wasn't as much the taxation that bothered them as it was their ignored political right to consent to such taxation. Leaders of Parliament argued that the colonies had virtual representation in Parliament because their notion of representation was mainly defined by class. However, the colonists rejected virtual representation because their understanding of representation had largely developed into a location-based system. The colonists didn't cry out for no taxation, but rather for no taxation without representation. Therefore, the main cause of the revolution was a denial of political rights, not the taxes themselves. Now, you may not agree with that, but it is an argument from the available evidence. So that's how I think you should set up your paragraphs. And if you do what I just did with at least 2 pieces of evidence, you will earn 2 points in this section for argumentation. Okay, now let's move on to the last section of the rubric, the analysis and reasoning section, in which you can earn up to 2 points. Both of these points are awarded for the essay as a whole. The first point is awarded for your use of historical reasoning. So basically, this point is awarded for doing what the prompt told you to do. If the prompt is a causation question, then you'll get this point if you successfully wrote an essay demonstrating causation. Same with change, or the same with comparison. And that's about as complicated as it gets. Did you perform the historical thinking skill that they asked you to perform? And if you've structured your thesis in your paragraphs like I just showed you, it will be very hard to miss this point. The second point in this section is awarded for complexity. And just like in the DBQ, this one is very difficult to
get the complexity point.
There are many ways to get this point, so I'll just let you consult the rubric for yourself to see all the options. But I think the simplest way to get that point is to weave a counter argument throughout the essay. And I've already set you up for this in...
All right, so I'm going to stop him there because Heimler likes to talk about this counter argument. I find that eminently complicated, so I'm just going to stop it there. But what he says is that the complexity point, like 2 out of every 100 essays statistically actually get the complexity point. So I always worry about you screw up all the other points trying to get the complexity point. Focus on getting a 5 out of 6 and don't worry about the complexity point. So that's my take on it. And the same is true for the DBQ, because I see more often than not kids trying to get the complexity point end up messing up the other points because they mess up the format. Just stick with the straight format and you'll do fine. So it's 10:25, you got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to give that time to you to work on the LEQ organizer. If you need one, raise your hand. I have some extras here, and I'll be happy to bring one to you if you need it. Yeah, of course. Anybody else?